Graham was cool, was calm, was cerebral. Some would use another C word, say crazy, but I wouldn't say that, Kennedy Graham. But I would lay a challenge to Kennedy Graham, and it's this. He and his party, it seems, and have been in the past, bound to the Labour Party, and there's every chance that they would like that again. But my challenge to Kennedy Graham is this. If he thinks that the Labour Party, with their big tax, big spend, big borrowing program, is the answer to any kind of environmental question that this country, indeed this world, faces, I say to him he's sadly mistaken. And actually, maybe for different reasons, but I think at least we can say the National Party, this about the National Party, we at least on this side accept things can't go on the way we are with the borrowing, the spending and the taxing in an unsustainable way, and maybe we mean different things by unsustainable, but the unsustainable way the Labour Party wants them to. And there's a very, very clear contrast at this election between the two major parties. On the one side, we've actually got, and we could dress this all up, prudent financial management, fiscal prudence, etc. Actually on that side, from Phil and the rest there, more debt. On this side, less debt. We've had a guy there, Phil Goff, who in the first month of this year, I think, what are his promises getting up to? Mr. Phil Goff got us about $5 billion worth in borrowing. Okay, we'll come to how he says he'll pay for that, but there was a stage there when every day we had new spending pledges. I wonder if Phil had he talked about those spending promises, or were they off the hoof? Because they certainly seem to be just rolling out of his mouth, a new one every single day when under pressure from interviewers. And we all know actually what that spending means. It means ultimately a downgrade by the credit rating agencies. It means actually higher interest because of that, because money costs more. And then it actually means for those ordinary Kiwis, those middle Kiwis actually that Charles Chauvel was talking about earlier, it means higher interest and higher mortgages, and that isn't good for anyone. In fact, what it probably means is even more people in Australia and overseas. And Phil Goff says, well, yes, but we can pay for this. We can pay for this by taxing the so-called rich more. Those so-called rich who actually probably left when Labor was last in government. Actually, the real rich, I've got news for Phil Twyford, the real rich don't pay tax anyway, so we're not talking about the real rich. And then we're talking about actually those so-called rich. Who are they? Well, actually, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're accountants, they're engineers, they're IT professionals. As my friend here says, they're police officers, they're all sorts of actually ordinary New Zealanders who will be forced actually as a result of what Phil Goff wants to do when he taxes these so-called rich to either rearrange their affairs, and they've already got used to doing that under Labor. That's not good for anyone except the lawyers, right, and the accountants. They'll rearrange their affairs or they'll leave this country. And I acknowledge we've still got that problem of people leaving this country, but the policies of Phil Goff will make them worse, Mr. Speaker. And his other policy, the other thing we see from Phil Goff actually, and they can correct me, the next speaker on the Labor side can correct me if I'm wrong, but effectively is saying, well, we just won't spend on military. We don't need a military. We don't need a Navy, an Air Force and an Army. And so that's where we'll find the money. Well, actually on this side, we think having a military is kind of important. And it's not actually about being sort of, these are some big words that Phil Twyford may, from his time in Oxfam, know, jingoistic or nationalistic or anything like that. It's actually just Phil Twyford about playing our part in the world. And that's why we're in other countries around the world, because we want to play our part as a little country down the bottom of the world. And we've got Phil Goff on the other side, unsustainable spending pledges. He says, well, we'll tax the rich, that won't bring them anywhere near the money, and we'll cut the military. We'll slash the military. And so, I say that's no recipe. Actually, the recipe for this country, and ordinary New Zealanders are learning this and know this, right? They're getting this, is to actually spend less, to slow down the growth of spending that went up over 50% under the last Labour government. And yes, actually, to explore and do the mixed ownership model. See, here's something Phil Twyford doesn't understand. Actually, Phil Goff understands, because he's the guy who's got more expertise in selling off the family silver than anyone in this house, right? I think, who was it? Someone said he'd been around 36 years. I read that somewhere. It was one of the columns. Well, it's 26. We all know it's 26. But he's got the most... But there's different ways to do these things. We're not talking trade sales like Phil Goff specialised in, and the government that he was a part. Contact energy. Well, actually, there's tens of thousands of New Zealanders in this country, Phil Twyford, who have shares in Contact Energy, right? They have shares in Contact Energy, and I'm not saying that's the perfect model, but I remind the members on that side, actually, they were the ones who sold down Air New Zealand, yes, because they have to. And look at the success of that. There's plenty of other successful models like this. The Port of Tauranga, actually, Trustpower, where social dividends are paid. Oh, here we go. Trevor Mallard. So is Trevor Mallard saying Air New Zealand isn't working? Air New Zealand's not working. Right now, we're ordinary Kiwis. Yes, that phrase Jim Anderton doesn't like. Ordinary mum and dad Kiwis own shares in Air New Zealand, and the government has the majority stake. It's working. In fact, it's not only working, it's thriving. It's had all sorts of innovative ideas to their seats, their cuddle class. Phil Twyford may have experienced that already, I don't know, on one of his trips to the third world to do good in other parts of the world. It is thriving. And we can do this, and yes, we've got some explaining to do. Yes, we've got some explaining to do, but we will do it, and they know. But it's not just about economics, Mr. Speaker. That's not the only place we're different. It's not just because we understand the economy, and we understand we can't spend, and the other side just wants to do that, spend, and as my friend here, Paul Quinn, said, go on a lolly scramble. It's also about a question of style. And I'm not talking about how someone walks down the runway or anything like that. Actually, we've got a Prime Minister at the moment, unlike Phil Goff, who is a non-traditional Prime Minister, who's actually prepared to give away tactical advantage. So we've seen that. We have seen that, Mr. Speaker, in the way that he has given away the election date for the good of this country, for the certainty of this country, to be straightforward actually with the public in the lead-up to the Rugby World Cup, and then after that, the election. We would never have seen that. We would never have seen that from Chris Hipkins' mother, Helen Clark. Right? We never would have seen that. Right? Actually, if I had more time, we'd go into that, but we don't have the time. But we would never have seen her give away that tactical advantage. And yet we did from the Prime Minister. And then the ruling out of Winston Peters. Well, the Labour Party says that's arrogant. I say, actually, the public of New Zealand have a right to know. They have a right to know what the parties are going to do, where we stand on these issues, and we have ruled them out. It would be good to see some of that clarity, actually, from the Labour Party. And so the other... What's that? Well, unlike Phil Twyford, I've lived in Te Atatu, right? Unlike Phil Twyford. Actually, unlike Phil Twyford, I know Te Atatu, right? I grew up. Now, Phil still doesn't know this, but he's lucky because his TomTom, his middle-class TomTom tells it where it is. But I grew up in a place called Gloria Ave in Te Atatu North, right? When I grew up there, it was called Te Atatu North, not Peninsula. It became Peninsula when Lila Hurry and all her middle-class lefty mates moved in, right? But when I was there, it was Te Atatu North. And then I then moved up in the world to a place called Te Atatu South, Strid Road. That may be part of Phil Twyford's electorate, but I'd be happy to come and talk to the people of Te Atatu about our mixed ownership model, because we've got a Prime Minister and the policies that will see this country through the bad times into the good times, and I'm proud to be part of this government.
Mr Speaker.